that's me. Even though maybe I don't put my head under the blanket, but I might go home and not come out. I will maybe not take any phone calls. I will not reach out to my friends anymore. I'm not there for anyone. I will just withdraw from the world. Please subscribe and turn on your notifications to stay tuned to the latest updates at the Powder Room Talk. Crazy when you're being told that having your own thoughts is a failure.
Yeah.
Okay, so from the conversation that we had just now, I realized that it is very important. One is to accept. Second is to overcome the failure itself.
Yeah.
Right? What do you think will be the negative impact if we cannot overcome failures in our lives?
As I told you, I think for me, failure is so connected with shame. But exponentially, it doesn't even make sense how much shame I would feel for a little failure. But because it's so connected, it would create this traumatizing feeling in me. Like that shame would be traumatizing. Like maybe we need to give an example of what kind of failure. I mean, there's so many different kinds of failure. We can fail our friends, we can fail our parents, we can fail our children, we can fail at work, right? I mean, mostly we were talking about failure at work probably, or failure,
family,
failure in relationships, right? And so for me, mostly failure has been achieving my own standard or falling short of my own really high perfect standard, right? So I would set this really high expectations on myself, and I would think other people would have really high expectations on me too. And if I would fail that, I would feel such a sense of shame that would be so traumatizing that I would completely withdraw into my small, comfortable space. Like I'm going back into my cave or my snail house or whatever you want to call it. And I would go into that space where I don't expect anything of myself. I know nobody else expects anything of me. And I would withdraw from people because the failure has paralyzed me for everything. And then I would find myself in that space feeling safe because nobody expects anything from me here. I cannot fail here. And it would just completely stop my growth. And I think I only became aware of that watching my own son, who's 5 now, because what I observed in him, I could relate to so much. For example, he's very cautious and he knows of himself, I'm a careful boy, right? Like, I know that's his thoughts in his mind. I'm careful, I'm a good boy, right? And so he would do something that's dangerous, like climb the balcony, and I'll be like, no, it's dangerous. And I would raise my voice because it's a danger.
Yeah.
And he would step down and like freeze, and straight away you can see like the shame is written all over his face. It's not just, oh, I made a mistake, I'm crying because I'm surprised. It's the shame of not being careful enough because he's a careful boy and he just failed his own standard. Even though he was 3 when it happened, right? Then he would run into his room, like he might not even run to me, he would just want to be away, and he would hide his face under the blanket. And observing this, I was like, that's me. Even though maybe I don't put my head under the blanket, but I might go home and not come out. I will maybe not take any phone calls. I will not reach out to my friends anymore. I'm not there for anyone. I will just withdraw from the world. And I'm like, wow, I'm 35 and I still have this. And so danger is that a lot of times when I'm on a really good way to achieving something, and then this one little mistake happens, I feel so ashamed of myself that I will give up. And I will never get anywhere. I will just stick with what I'm comfortable with, where I know I'm not going to disappoint, where there's no risk of failure, which is still a lot of areas in my life where I feel like, okay, I'm not really going to fail here. But if I avoid failing, I will never reach the potential that I know I have.
Yes.
I know there's so much more that I could achieve with the talents that have been given to me and all that, but I'll just not get there because I'll be so ashamed of failing in between, failing my standard, failing other people's expectations. I will just draw back and say, you know what? I have a comfortable life. I don't actually have to. I don't have to get there to be comfortable. I'm not doing it for the money anyway. You know, like I'm quite comfortable.
Yeah.
I've achieved a lot in my life already. I have a beautiful house, I have cars, I have children, I have a wonderful husband who I'm a good influence in. I can also fulfill myself through him, you know, where I would be like, oh, you know what? I can avoid the failure if I just fill all that I have and all the things that I'm supposed to give to the world, I channel it through him, through the world.
Wow.
And I would just stay back and never come into the foreground, but at least in some way, I would have given something of me to the world, right? But at the end of my life, I would probably come to the point where I'm like, I could have done so much more, but I was so afraid to fail and feel shame about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
This is interesting because I want to share one thing that I learned from my therapist. Different types of people. There are people when they are facing failures, they internalize their failures. And there are some people that are externalizing their failures to other people, to circumstances. And actually, my therapist said to me that the best thing that you can do when you're facing failures is seeing it as it is, because it's something that we need to learn, that I personally need to learn not to internalize, and of course not to externalize as well. I just need to see it as something that I have to strategically conquer and not making it personal. That's what my therapist told me.
I actually, you know, as I'm hearing from, like, you know, that really just, wow, thank you for being just so vulnerable.
It is as it
sharing
is.
This, right? It is as it is. And what I was like hearing out of it is that misconception of failure that we were talking about earlier, of what we think failure is, right? Instead of what it isn't, it actually becomes a sort of like confidence killer that actually affected your self-esteem.
Yeah.
And like I just kind of felt like this is a part of life that all of us have to conquer. It's like, you know, there's this big Goliath, and you know, and one day you're going to have to arrive at one point where we have to slay that giant. We have to take that giant down, because it's like, if not, it holds us back when we don't deal with it. And like I think it undealt with issues or misconception like that would trigger another big issue that I don't see you having it, but then I commonly observe it, which is called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, I'm gonna actually read out the definition.
She has a cheat sheet.
Yes, I do. So imposter syndrome is an internal experience of believing that you are not as competent as others perceive you to be. So as you were mentioning, you know there is that potential because of all these different factors. They cannot accept what other people perceive of them that are actually positive. And I usually, like, to be honest, I think like somebody that has an imposter syndrome, one thing that I observe is they stay stuck in their, I wouldn't call it predicament, but in that state of status quo for a really long time. And it's not because they are bad people or anything, no, nothing like that, but it's just that they haven't, you know, killed that giant and accepted that awareness and realizing that failure is great. You know, failure is a great lesson. It actually helps me learn something about myself. And so before they actually arrive at that state, I noticed that they either would become that difficult teammate when it's in a team setting, or that difficult friend. It's like that, you know, we all know like that one friend who we're okay to have around, but you know, that one friend doesn't, doesn't do that girl time with us. There's always this like unspoken arm's length,
Yeah.
and it's not because we want to alienate the person, but it's because they carry all these baggages or denial about themselves. They become very difficult to
And suck the energy.
suck the energy in the room, and it becomes difficult. And I just really wonder, maybe even your leadership like roles, have you actually had to deal with someone that you have to groom, or personally gone through that journey of feeling like an imposter?
I personally experienced it myself.
Okay.
I really have a huge imposter syndrome. I think I'm still trying to manage that because once in a while I still have that. So back in 2019, I think that was I feel like it's my biggest failure as a leader, because at that time I was having personal and health problems at home. I could not bring the whole self to the table when it comes to work. And because of that, because I have an unfinished issue in my personal life, I couldn't be the best leader that I could, and it made a huge turmoil in my team. Whereas before, I had a great team. Everyone was so perfect. Everyone was hardworking, ambitious. They are on the same level of belongings to the brand. But because I failed as being a good leader, I felt like I did ruin everything back then, 3 years ago. And of course, because of that, I tried to overcome it. I tried to sort things out, but it was a bit too late, I think. And I blame it out on myself, even until this day. Even until this day, I still think because of that one mistake that, am I really a good leader? Am I cut for this job? Maybe I'm not supposed to be in this position. But then slowly with time, I learned that if I keep telling that to myself, then I could not get out from that shell. Because what I tried to do is I spoke to my boss, I spoke to my teammates, I spoke to my friends about what I did and what should I do to prevent that from happening in the future. And they're all actually giving me a really good advice and feedbacks, and they're reassuring me that it's okay, you just messed up, you can try again. But it's my inner voice that's keeping me from growing. Because I kept beating myself out from that. I kept telling myself, I don't think I'm cut from this job. I don't think I'm good enough. And that's where what you said, that we have to beat that Goliath. We have to beat that giant inside of ourselves. I think the biggest enemy is me. And as time goes by, I practice meditating, I practice self-awareness, I practice self-healing. And slowly I try to make peace with myself that yes, I failed. 3 years ago I failed. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to fail every now and then. So I think it's the courage to forgive myself in a way. That I have given the chance to myself to grow.
And would it be safe to say that, like your example of, your therapist actually teaching you that there are two types of how people deal with failures. I assume you're one that internalizes it, and having that awareness of how you actually treat failure, it became like you also had an awareness, and from that awareness, you knew, when this happens, I should not listen to this voice or to this noise, right? And then you take steps to actually be like, this is not correct, this is a lie, I'm not stuck at this point, and then you move forward. Would that be a right way to describe it?
Because one thing that I learned in my leadership role is whenever things get tough, we often put our emotions in the situations. And being a leader, we cannot always put our emotions in the situations. We have to be logic. We have to be logical. We have to be transparent also. But we need to take the emotions out of the equations in order to make great decisions. And that's what I learned to be to myself as well. That I shouldn't keep hearing these negative voices inside my head. I just have to try to be more strategic. Of course, it's harder than I said it, but but I think with practice, I am managing it better. I think.
You know what I don't like about the fear of failure is when I listen to two of you, or even with JJ, is I hate it on how much it steals people's potential.
Yeah.
You know, the fear of failure stealing your potential in life, that you can achieve so much more if you just if we learn to overcome that kind of failure. Because you know, for Lola, I believe she has so much great potential if, you know, in the future when she learned to overcome that failure and not trying to going back to your little shell, you know, and going back into your little corner of comfort zone, if we may say, and trying new things that probably, yes, you may fail, and even from your stories that how much your team is going to lose if you just giving up and not trying it again. So I really feel like I hate it because it steals a lot of women's potential as well. You know, the fear of failure, of being able to be the best version of you. And the sad thing is, even when you be the best version of you, the fear of failure makes you feel like you always think that it's too good to be true. And when it's becoming too good to be true, you don't believe it. You just want to run away because you think that, oh, it's just too good, it's not me. And you break that trust, you bring down your potential in life, you cannot achieve what's supposed to be you just because you're so afraid of failure. So I really believe that, you know, we really need to learn to overcome that kind of fear. And I like how John Maxwell said it, that do not let failure bully your lives.